Thank you and welcome to the show today. The topic today is a profile on John J. Hooker, the gubernatorial Democratic candidate. And Mr. Hooker, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Doctor, I'm delighted to be here with you.
You know, Mr. Hooker, I think that there are so many things that we'd like to talk to you about. And you've been involved in Tennessee politics for such a long time, and you've made such a contribution to Tennessee politics. What we'd like to do today is to not only talk about your candidacy, but we'd like to talk about John J. Hooker, to have you during the first part of this show to talk about, in any way you wish to do, so to talk about your background, your education, and some of the things that got you involved in Tennessee politics and some of the positions that you've held and some of the personnel. It's that kind of interview, that is to give our audience an opportunity to see you. And let's do that from that perspective this morning.
That's great. Well, I'm 68 years old. I'm a lawyer by trade. I have been in several different businesses in my life. I spent a good deal of time practicing law. And then I've been an entrepreneur. I had a business called Many Pearls Chicken, which was a copy of Kentucky Fried Chicken in the mid-60s. I was one of the founders of Hospital Corporation of America. I was chairman of the board of STP. I was the chairman of the board of United Press International, the worldwide news agency. I was the publisher of the Banner. And I've been in other businesses. So I've had a long life so far, 68 years old. And I've been in many different businesses. I like business. I like being an entrepreneur. I like capitalism. But I also like freedom.
Good.
When I was a young person, my father used to talk to me about the fact that we live in a free, capitalistic society. And one of the problems that we have is that we sometimes don't understand that there's a hyphen between those two, and that there is the need for freedom that's an addition to capitalism. That is the problem we have in America today, is that our political system is squelching the freedom in favor of the person who is able to give campaign contributions, and whereas the other person who can't. So I'm a capitalist at heart, but I'm also a man who deeply believes in freedom. So in addition to business and the law, I got my start in the law with my father, who was a very distinguished lawyer. There are many people, I'm sure, who listen to this show today who can remember my father. He died in 1970, but he was a really very, very able man and very popular among the lawyers. He was a lawyer's lawyer. He was the man who prosecuted Jimmy Hoffa, the Hoffa Penitentiary. But he also had a wide variety of law practice, all sorts of criminal cases and damage suits and constitutional cases. He had a great life and a great practice. I got started in the law business in 1957, and in 1958 the governor hired me along with a more distinguished lawyer, an older gentleman named Jack Norman, and we got involved in the Schoolfield impeachment trial in 1958. And that was the beginning of my interest in public life and interest of the public officials honoring their commitment and honoring their oaths. And there was a judge in Chattanooga, Tennessee, who had taken an $18,000 bribe, which he had claimed was a campaign contribution. And so the governor of Tennessee, a very distinguished governor by the name of Frank Clement, got Jack Norman Sr., and he got me involved in the case. The truth about it is, the reason that I got to get in the case at such a young age was that my father was friendly with Judge Schoolfield, in the sense that they had gone to school together. And Jack Norman and my father were great contemporaries, and Mr. Norman was afraid that my father was going to defend the judge.
And so he put his son.
In order to keep my father from defending the judge, he took me into the case, which was a great break for me. But it got me my start. And in that case, in 1958, Bobby Kennedy came down and testified in the Schoolfield impeachment trial because it involved a bribe, and it involved a public official, and it involved the Teamster Union. And the McClellan Committee was then very much in power and in vogue in Washington. Senator McClellan from Arkansas, and Bobby was the general counsel of that committee. Came down, testified in the Schoolfield impeachment trial, and I got to know him at that time. And I remember the first day he was here, he wanted to go out to see after he testified that all morning long for 5 hours, he wanted to go out and see the Hermitage.
That's what
I never will forget the look on his face and the way he studied the Hermitage. And at that time, Jack, this was 1958, was thinking about running for president in 1960. Bobby just drank in the whole experience, and I became convinced just with that that afternoon that the Kennedys were going to make a real run at it, just from watching the intensity with which Bobby became involved with the Hermitage and Andrew Jackson. And Andrew Jackson said something that was Bobby's favorite quote. It was, "One man with courage is a majority." Andrew Jackson said that, and Bobby loved that quote, and I've always loved it since too. One man with courage is a majority. You really got to lead.
You know, I've watched your career, your political career. I was Hooker for a number of years. We've been here since 1972. And one thing always seems to come out when you talk about your public life and et cetera, has to be that Kennedy connection. I think quite recently I heard you making another speech quite recently, and again, he had a great impact upon you.
Oh, no doubt about it. And not only Bobby personally, but Jack as well, and then the people in the Kennedy administration, and Martin Luther, and the setting, and the time, and the conflict. As bad as I wanted to be governor, I had rather have been a Kennedy man and involved in the pursuit of civil rights in the 60s than to have been governor. And I knew that at the time. When I ran for governor the first time in '66, I ran against a man who was an admitted old-fashioned segregationist, a man by the name of Buford Ellington. And I ended up getting, maybe 96% of the Afro-Americans voted for me. And for two basic reasons. One, that I was a Kennedy man and they trusted the Kennedys. And two, that I was running against this fellow who was an old-fashioned segregationist. But the old-fashioned segregationist, he was happy for me to have 96% of the Afro-American votes in exchange for the backlash in the white community. If I had been willing to alter my position about that sum, I might have won in '66, but it never occurred to me to alter my position. I was who I was, doing what I thought I should do, and those days the intensity of the struggle was so great. Then in of course, the terrible tragedy of '68, when Bobby got assassinated. Bobby had just been to Nashville about 3 weeks before he got assassinated. And I had talked to him on that occasion about the possibility that he might get assassinated. We were riding to the airport with John Siegenthaler, you undoubtedly.
Hey, I was, that was one of the things. I mean, I've had him over there too, and there's such a striking similarity in terms of your philosophy and the things that you say, dealing especially with the kids. Yes, go on and talk about that.
Yeah, well, John Siegenthaler and I were great friends. And I was the general counsel of the Nashville Tennessean, and John was the editor of the Tennessean. The paper was owned by a man named Eamon Evans, who had been very kind to us both. He made John probably the youngest editor of a major metropolitan newspaper in America, and made me the general counsel at a very young age. And through that, we had the opportunity to be of assistance to the Kennedys in '60 and thereafter. And so Bobby had come here in '68, and we were on the way to the airport, and little David Kennedy was sitting on my lap. He was, I guess David at that time was about 8 or 9 years old. And he was looking out the front of the car, and Bobby and I were sitting in the back. John Siegenthaler was sitting in the front. And I was telling Bobby that I wanted to make a substantial campaign contribution to him. And I pulled the checks out of my pocket. And he said, "Don't give me those checks." He said, "Go to California and give those to Steve Smith." And I said, "I'll do that." And this was during the time the California primary was on.
Let me interrupt you for the first commercial break, and we'll pick up right at this when we come back. We'll be